we're joined by an esteemed guest today. It's absolutely an honor to be graced by the presence of Mike and Kathy Hendershott from the Chicago area, originally from Dallas. Mike, Kathy, thanks for joining the program.
Thanks for having us.
All right. We're also joined by Jon Hill, who is, Jon, you're in the Dallas market, correct?
Yes, I am. I'm in Dallas Fort Worth. Yep. Thanks for having me, Bob.
John's from the Morrow Hill Commercial Real Estate Group, and they represent us not in every part of the country, but in quite a bit. And Jon, thank you for joining. And then we're also joined by our Vice President of our Vice President of Real Estate Development, Kris Smith. And Kris, thanks for joining the program.
Good to be here, Bob.
All right. So today's conversation will really and the reason we have all these groups here is for the topic of conversion. It has been one of the things that we've done recently at Hand and Stone is we have seen some opportunities from our competitors who maybe did not succeed in a specific location. Mike and Kathy have had some experience in this as Hand and Stone franchisees, and Kris and Jon were part of that process. So we, again, thank you all for joining us, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So we'll just jump right into it. One of the things I think, I've been asked a number of times is, with this opportunity, whereas, we might go into a competitor's former space, can you talk about the approach to this type of opportunity versus, maybe Jon, I'll ask you first, this type of opportunity versus a traditional lease and how this is to be approached? And if you could kind of give us what your experience has shown over the past years, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, I think it really starts on the front end. So we study disposition efforts for various brands and competitors around the country. And I think identifying some of those underperforming locations early on before they actually become on the market can be very advantageous to a prospect, because it would allow us to essentially backfill a location, and that allows the landlord to negotiate terms before the tenant is officially out of the space. And sometimes they negotiate for some sort of figure on the dollar. So call it 20 cents, 30 cents on the dollar for that particular tenant to exit the space. Think of it like a buyout. Well, the reason the reason why that's positive is because that would allow additional funds that would not have normally been allocated to be available funds for the acquisition of the new tenant and the new brand. So I really think kind of studying those on the front end, and that's what we do quite a bit, is watching those around the country, whether by brand or by kind of regionally, and looking at the ones that may not make it in their particular.
Great, thanks, Jon. Mike and Kathy, I mean, you've done this now. Is it twice you've gone through this process? Mike, Kathy, you've done this a couple of times now. Is that correct?
Three
times.
But a conversion.
Yeah, we've had 5 locations, and the last 3 of our locations were all conversions from a previous competitor.
And with those three conversions that you have gone through now, what has been, if you can share with us, some of your biggest challenges?
Well, the biggest challenges, obviously, one, you want to make sure there's a reason why the competitor went out. You have a good location, and obviously working with Kris and Jon been huge with that. But I think one of the biggest challenges you have is the quality of the construction a little bit. I mean, is it up to the standards of Hand and Stone? So we've had to go through and look at, in some cases, some reconfiguration, but in other cases, we've just been able to modify the location with just a little paint and carpet. So I think that's the underlying structure. Just make sure you have a good quality unit that you can work with. And so far, we've had good luck with that.
Yeah, and Bob, Jon Hill here. I'll add to that and say that understanding the specifications of how the premises was built is really important, but also understanding what the landlord considered furniture, fixture, and equipment to the space, just to ensure that if you can get ahead of it to where some of those items weren't removed that we may need or want to reuse before they vacate is also an important step.
Okay, excellent. Kris Smith, could you, a lot of times there's a lot of benefits to obviously having an existing spa, but that can present to a franchisor or a franchisee. Can you talk about that a little bit?
About the advantages of going into an existing spa location?
Correct.
Yeah. Well, obviously, the cost of entry is not going to be nearly as high for your fit out and your build out as it would be starting from scratch. We have converted over the past 3 or 4 years, we've converted about 13 or 14 of our competitor locations into a hand and stone spa. And we've seen on average, depending upon the level of work that needs to be done there. And as Kathy and Mike had mentioned earlier, some require, us to, put the plumbing into each of the treatment rooms. Some do not. But on average, we've seen a savings anywhere from $100,000 to $250,000 in fit out costs into going into one of our competitor locations. So obviously, to get a hand and stone up and running, that would be the clear advantage, and certainly the time to do so, is an advantage as well. We don't always have the luxury of finding these opportunities, but when we do, and they're in a market where, it fits, geography wise, based on existing locations and their areas of protection, this is, in our opinion, a home run when you can find those type of opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, Bob, our last location that we built out, we turned it around in 30 days and had it open.
And our total construction cost was only about $85,000, which is just a fraction of what, another build out was like, to Chris's point. So it was a huge advantage. It was a nice, clean location.
Mm-hmm.
That's outstanding. And Mike and Kathy, I mean, in a situation like that, can you share some of your experiences regarding employees? Were you able to take advantage of maybe some of the former employees at the existing business that had gone out?
Yeah, in our first location, we actually hired probably about 3 or 4 of the staff, and being a multi-unit owner, it was advantageous because we were able to put them on a schedule in one of our other locations until we built out. And those people, or several of those people, are still with us. And in the most current location we did, again, we hired probably about 3 of the massage therapists and estheticians, and we're able to keep those people because we had a location in proximity that we could bring people in and train them. So it has been advantageous for sure from a staffing standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And how about from a customer standpoint? How were you received after the competitive business went out and you opened up?
How we were perceived, I would have to be honest with you, it was a little bit, because some of these competitors, all 3 of them basically exited the market. And so they left some bad feelings with their customers. But we were able to make some incentives for clients to bring them back in. And to be honest with you, part of it, the advantage is, I don't know that I'd do this if it weren't for the Hand and Stone brand, but having a strong presence in the Chicagoland area. These other locations had one location and they closed, and now bringing a Hand and Stone into an existing location, it brings a lot of credibility to the market. And so we were able to capture quite a few of the clients, and we did some promotions for those. And so it definitely does help. But you got a little ill will that you have to get past in some cases with clients because they may have got left holding.
Gotcha.
And Bob, I'll add something from the real estate perspective that is definitely saves on time and getting up and running would be from the permitting and the use perspective, because if it was a former or something of the same along the same lines of the same use, you also gain time and there's some cost savings along with that as well.
Yes, that's what happened in the Naperville location, because we just were able to go into the city of Naperville and say, we're just painting, and they just gave us a permit for painting, and that's how we were able to turn it around so fast in 30 days.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. And Jon Hill, this is a question for you. Your ability to negotiate tenant improvement allowance, has been outstanding from our experience. Can you share with us what that picture looks like with landlords where you have a situation like this where we're going to be taking over a former space of a competitor?
Yeah, I think there's a number of factors that go into that. Obviously, time that the tenant was there when they did their original lease comes into play. Meaning were those tenant improvements fully, amortized through their life or not, would come into play. Also, to go back to my original point about getting in front of them early, I do see there's a lot of stats around getting more funds out of the asset manager, the landlord, whoever it may be, or early on in that. And also it comes down to a marketing strategy. Does the leasing team there that's representing the landlord, do they think, hey, we can move this space to somebody that's in the same type of business because it's already there and they have a marketing strategy around that. If they're a more sophisticated landlord, that may not come as much into play. It may be more about them selecting, and especially on a quality asset, you'd find more of a REIT, real estate investment trust approach, to be more around the quality of the brand going in there, and they're willing to pay some additional, tenant improvement and resources, free rent and things along those lines to land that particular brand. So I think, from a hand and stone perspective, with the amount of locations we have now, we're able to, do some things that maybe some of the competitors that aren't as strong or that don't have as strong of a name in a particular market wouldn't be able to achieve.
Okay, great. Kris, anything to add to that?
No, I mean, I think Jon hit it kind of right on the head. I mean, a lot of it is dependent upon how long the competitor was operating prior to them closing or going out of business. But, certainly the advantage for the landlord is being able to, lease the space to a very similar use. And, if they are not interested, for example, in providing a high level of tenant improvement allowance, as Jon had mentioned, then we've been very successful in achieving, several months of either free rent or free base rent, where you would still be responsible for your triple net costs and extra charges, or even abated rent, where you add that free rent onto the end of the initial lease term. That's very important, obviously, for us and ramping up our business. And they can take that savings and put it right into their marketing and advertising program.
Yeah.
Great. And, Jon, I mean, I've been asked by a number of existing franchisees and even prospective franchisees the question of how do we go about finding this location? Is there any trick to that? Can you maybe share a little bit of the secret sauce and how we've been able to do this so far?
About finding existing retrofits is that
Correct.
what you mean? Okay, yeah. Well, following the disposition list is pretty paramount. But we're closely working with real estate directors at various brands, and whether we represent them or not, the point is that we do kind of get ahead of a lot of that information, and we start tracking those retrofits. And I think early, like I mentioned earlier, if we get in front of them and we look at them before they're actually there, we have a lot more success in achieving a better financial package for our franchisee. And there are across the country a handful of kind of regional players that we watch closely. That we not to bet on anyone else's demise, but they're on our watch list, to say the least.
Yeah, and we'd echo that, because our first one was they just weren't going to renew the lease and they exited. And again, Morrow Hill was able to find that location for us. And it was one of the original locations we looked at, but they had exclusives at the time. And the landlord came and called us back because we said, if it's open, it's available, we want it. The second one was really around a location that had just abandoned, and the landlord was left with. He paid out a lot of TI, and he was really eager to get somebody in. We were able to retrofit that in a short period of time. And the last thing I say is listen to your customers, because our last location, the customer came in Kathy's working the front desk, and he happened to be a customer who tipped us that this location had given their clients and their employees 2 weeks notice. And we immediately called Kris and said, hey, there's an opportunity here. So it's all around, right? I mean, it's just, I think you have to listen. You know who the players are, right? In many cases. So that's how we got that one. It was record time. So and trust the boss. We all know who's in charge, right?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. All right. Well, this has been a great conversation. I guess I'll just throw this one out to anybody that wants to answer it. You know, one of the things is, you know, you look back and you've gained all this experience, and there's always some things you say, you know what, I probably would have done this differently. Of all the things that you've gone through with now 3 locations, this is for all 3 of you, or 4 of you, I should say. But what would you have done differently if you had it to do all over again? And you can feel free to share any type of experience along those lines.
Yeah, I'll go first. Mike and Kathy probably have a little bit more context to add with their their personal experiences. But just as a overall statement, I think we touched on it earlier, but really studying the current condition of the space, the specs, our quality is extremely high end, and we dot our I's and cross our T's when it comes to our specs, and I think we need to be careful not to assume that else has specs the same as a hand and stone. And so really, I think studying those specifications early on so you can use those as leverage points in negotiations, I think would be pretty important.
Great. Thank you, John. Mike, Kathy, anything to add?
No, I would echo that. I think our lessons learned, there were things we could have done different to salvage some space. But I think you still have to maintain the hand and stone standard. As Kathy mentioned a while ago, as far as the water, there could have been some things we could have done with build out. They could have helped us with that. But I think those are the main things we would have done. It's just, could we have kept more of the space or modified our design a little bit? And we saw a progression from the first one we did to the last one we did on how much modification was really required.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. And lastly, Kris, anything to add to that?
I don't know if there's necessarily anything that we could do different, because each of these are unique and, kind of the opportunity that we're taking over. As Mike and Kathy had mentioned, the first one we did, I think, for the system was their Naperville location. And right. We've learned so much since that initial conversion. We've got a lot more data on the savings, dependent upon how much work needs to be done with the conversion, whether it's purely aesthetics or if you're replacing floor or the front counter. So there's a lot of things that go into it. So I don't know if there's anything necessarily that we would change. We're just learning from each and every one of these conversions that we've done and really kind of sharpening the pencil and getting much better at it.
Yeah.
Well, on behalf of Nicole Alberger and myself here in the treatment room, we want to thank the Hendershotts, you, Kris Smith, and Jon Hill. Thanks so much for joining the treatment room today. It was a great conversation. We learned a lot, and we'll look forward to educating some of the franchisees out there as well. Y'all take care. God bless and stay safe.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.